The front door was hanging open. The porch light swung in the cold Virginia wind, tapping softly against the siding like a warning. Inside my house, something had crashed. Glass glittered across the hardwood floor. A lamp lay shattered beside the couch. And standing in the middle of my living room, her hands shaking, her face pale, as Winter was the homeless girl I'd picked up that morning. At her feet, my younger brother Ethan was tied to one of my dining chairs, blood running from the corner of his mouth. And behind her, in the soft yellow glow of the kitchen light, my dying mother was standing. Standing. For the first time in 3 months. I'm not ashamed to admit it. My knees nearly gave out. For one impossible second, I thought I was looking at a ghost. And then my mother looked at me and said, calm as Sunday morning, "Claire, honey, I think this girl just saved my life." That was the moment everything changed. But if you'd told me 12 hours earlier that my life was about to be turned upside down by a homeless girl outside a gas station in Richmond, Virginia, I would have laughed and kept driving. That morning had started like every other morning for the past 6 months. Exhaustion. The kind that settles into your bones and never really leaves. I'd been up half the night checking my mother's oxygen monitor. Her breathing had grown shallower over the past few weeks. Congestive heart failure, the doctors said. At 72, after years of quietly ignoring symptoms and insisting she was fine, her body had finally called in its debts. Hospice had started coming twice a week. But it wasn't enough. And as a Marine logistics captain stationed at Fort Gregg Adams, I couldn't just call out whenever things got hard. Duty doesn't bend for grief. At 5:30 that morning, I stood in my kitchen in uniform, staring into a cup of burnt coffee while Mom dozed in the next room. The hospice aide had quit the night before. Family emergency, she'd said. I hadn't even blamed her. Life happened. But standing there in the half-dark, hearing my mother cough through the wall, panic began creeping into my chest. I had no one else. My father had died 8 years earlier. And Ethan, my younger brother by 4 years, had perfected the art of disappearing whenever responsibility appeared. I hadn't heard from him in nearly 2 years. The man could smell hardship from 3 states away. Mom stirred when I checked on her before leaving. Her silver hair fanned across the pillow, thinner than I remembered from childhood. She smiled anyway. She always smiled for me. "You look tired, sweetheart." "I'm fine." "You've said that every day for 20 years. That made me laugh. She reached for my hand, her skin cool and paper thin. "Don't carry everything alone." I kissed her forehead. "I'll figure something out." At noon, after a punishing 6-hour briefing on supply chain delays and transport failures, I finally got permission to break for lunch. I drove aimlessly, at first my stomach tight with worry. That's how I ended up at Miller's Gas and Grocery off Route 301. It was the kind of old roadside stop that still sold boiled peanuts in paper cups and had faded advertisements in the windows from 10 years ago. I barely noticed her at first. She was sitting on the curb near the ice machine, knees drawn to her chest, wearing a threadbare gray hoodie despite the November cold. A cardboard sign leaned against her leg. "We'll work for food." Plenty of people would have looked away. Truth is, I almost did. Then I noticed the book in her lap. A nursing textbook. Not new, but carefully kept. She was reading it like it mattered. I don't know why that stopped me. Maybe because my mother had been a nurse for 38 years at St. Mary's before retirement. Maybe because I was desperate enough to see hope anywhere. I walked over. She looked up, fast, guarded but alert. She couldn't have been older than 19. Maybe 20. Her face was pale from cold, but her eyes were sharp. Not defeated. Just careful. I nodded toward the book. "You studying?" She hesitated. "Used to." "What happened?" The answer took a second. Aged out of foster care, lost housing after my CNA program ended, been getting by where I can. No self-pity. Just facts. That impressed me. "You know patient care?" "Yes, ma'am." "Vitals?" "Yes." "Medication timing?" "Yes." "Basic emergency response?" She gave a small nod. I studied her for a moment. There was intelligence there. And pride. Not the kind that begs, the kind that survives. "What's your name?" "Lily." I glanced toward my truck. Every Marine instinct I had screamed this was reckless. You don't bring strangers home. You don't trust people because they answer questions well. But exhaustion makes gamblers of us all. And something about her reminded me of the younger soldiers I'd mentored over the years, the ones carrying more than anyone could see. I made the decision before fear could stop me. "Get in the car," I said. Her eyes widened. "What?" "My mother's dying. I need help tonight. You'll be paid cash fed properly, and if you steal from me, I promise you'll regret it." That earned the faintest ghost of a smile. "Fair enough." She stood slowly clutching the nursing book. And for the first time all day, something inside me loosened. Maybe hope. Maybe foolishness. Sometimes they look the same at first. Neither of us knew then that by nightfall my brother would be tied to a chair. And my entire understanding of family would be rewritten. The ride home was quiet at first. Lily sat stiffly in the passenger seat of my old Ford Explorer, her nursing textbook balanced carefully on her lap like it was something sacred. She kept glancing out the window at the passing Richmond neighborhoods, as if she expected me to suddenly change my mind and throw her back out onto the roadside. I understood that look. The Marines teach you how to read fear quickly. Not the loud kind, the useful kind, the kind people carry when life has taught them not to trust easy promises. I kept my eyes on the road. "You hungry?" She hesitated. "Yes, ma'am." "You don't have to call me ma'am, Claire's fine." Another pause. "Yes, Claire." There was something about the way she said my name, careful, almost unfamiliar, that made me realize how young she really was. 19, maybe. Too young to have that much caution in her voice. We stopped at a diner just off Chamberlain Avenue, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a waitress who called everyone honey. I ordered her a turkey club fries and pie. At first she barely touched it. Then hunger took over and she ate like someone trying not to look hungry. I pretended not to notice. Older folks know that dignity matters. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is look away. When we got back to my house, the November sky had already begun darkening. The place was modest, 2 stories white, siding a narrow front porch my father had built himself 25 years earlier. Mom always said the house smelled like him when it rained. Fresh cedar and coffee. I hadn't noticed that in years. Inside, everything was still. Too still. The kind of stillness that had become normal since Mom got sick. Machines hummed softly from her room. Oxygen concentrator, air purifier, the little mechanical chorus of decline. I turned to Lily. "Ground rules." She straightened. "You don't go into my office. You don't touch financial paperwork. If my mother asks for anything, you call me if you're unsure. And if something feels wrong, call 911 first, then me." She nodded seriously. "Yes, Claire." I studied her another moment. No defensiveness, no attitude. Just focus. Good. When we entered Mom's room, she was awake, propped against her pillows with a paperback mystery novel open on her lap. Her silver hair framed her face softly, and though she looked frailer every day, her eyes remained bright. She noticed Lily immediately. "Well," Mom said, adjusting her glasses, "aren't you prettier than the hospice agency ever managed?" Lily blinked in surprise. Then, to my astonishment, she laughed. A real laugh. Small but genuine. Something about the sound eased the tension in the room instantly. "This is Lily," I said. "She'll be helping tonight." Mom studied her with the kind of gentle attention only old nurses seem to master. Not staring. Assessing. Seeing. Then she smiled. "Thank you for coming, sweetheart." Lily's expression shifted strangely at that. Like gratitude had caught her off guard. "You're welcome, ma'am." Mom gave me a pointed look. "You feed this child?" "Yes." She still looked starved. I rolled my eyes. She ate half the diner menu. Mom smiled faintly. "Good, keep doing that." For a little while, things felt almost normal. Lily checked Mom's pulse and oxygen saturation with practiced hands. She adjusted pillows properly, spoke calmly, and listened carefully when Mom explained her medication schedule. No fumbling. No pretending. She knew what she was doing. For the first time in weeks, I felt something dangerous. Relief. Then the front door opened. And that feeling vanished. I didn't need to see him to know who it was. Some people carry disturbance with them like weather. Ethan always had. He appeared in Mom's doorway looking like a department store advertisement: camel overcoat, polished loafers, expensive haircut, expensive smile. 40 years old and still somehow dressed like he was auditioning to be richer than he actually was. "Well," he said, looking around, "this is cozy." Mom's face tightened. I felt my jaw lock. "Ethan." "Claire." His smile widened just enough to annoy me. He stepped into the room carrying a bottle of wine no one would drink. Classic Ethan gesture. "Bring appearances never help." He kissed Mom's cheek. "How's my favorite girl?" Mom said nothing. That should have embarrassed him. It didn't. Then his eyes landed on Lily. And something ugly flickered there. "What's this?" "She's helping care for Mom," I said. He actually laughed. "You picked up some homeless stray off the street." Lily lowered her eyes immediately. I saw her shoulders tense. And just like that, 20 years of protecting weaker people snapped into place inside me. "She has a name," I said evenly. Ethan smirked. "Relax, I'm sure she's harmless." Mom's voice cut through the room like clean steel. "Leave if you're going to behave like that." That surprised him. It surprised me too. He recovered quickly. "Mom, come on, I'm worried about you, that's why I'm here." The lie landed like wet paper. Nobody believed it. Ethan hadn't visited in nearly 2 years. Not during Mom's diagnosis. Not during her hospital stay. Not after Dad's anniversary. Nothing. And suddenly he cared. No. He wanted something. I could feel it. That evening I made dinner while Lily stayed with Mom. Ethan drifted around the kitchen pretending familiarity. Then casually asked, still keeping Dad's trust paperwork in the office. There it was. The truth. I turned slowly. "Why?" He shrugged too quickly. "Just wondering. Dad's estate trust remained under Mom's control until her death. Then it would split evenly between Ethan and me. Unless she amended it. And Ethan knew she'd been considering exactly that. Because unlike me, Mom had finally stopped excusing his failures." I leaned closer. "If that's why you're here, leave now." His smile sharpened. "You always assume the worst." "No," I said quietly. "You trained me well enough that I don't have to assume." For just a second, something cold entered his eyes. Then he smiled again. That false, polished smile. And I knew with perfect certainty. He wasn't leaving. Not without trying something. Hours later, when duty called me back to base for an overnight logistics emergency, I kissed Mom goodbye, gave Lily my number again, and looked Ethan dead in the face. "If anything happens here." He raised his hands innocently. "Claire, we're family." I should have known then. Family can be the most dangerous word in the world. And as I drove into the dark Virginia night, I had no idea Ethan was already setting his plan in motion. The drive back to Fort Gregg Adams felt longer than usual. Virginia nights have a particular kind of darkness in late November. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, all fog and thunder and warning signs. Just a quiet, steady blackness pressing against the windows while the highway hums beneath your tires. It gives a person too much room to think. And that night all I could think about was Ethan. I'd spent my whole life understanding my brother in ways I never wanted to. Some people are born with a moral compass that points true north no matter what storms hit them. Ethan's always spun toward opportunity. Even as a boy, he could smile sweetly while pocketing your lunch money. At 12, he forged our father's signature to skip school. At 16, he stole from Mom's church donation envelope and blamed a neighborhood kid. At 28, he convinced our widowed aunt to invest $40,000 in a startup that didn't exist. By the time she realized the money was gone, Ethan had already vanished to Atlanta. And somehow he always landed on his feet. People like Ethan survive because decent folks assume everyone eventually grows a conscience. They don't. Not always. That truth had taken me years to accept. Around midnight, I checked my phone during a supply coordination briefing. No missed calls. No texts. That should have reassured me. Instead, it unsettled me. Mom usually texted something by then. A joke about bad hospital coffee from her nursing days. A reminder not to skip meals. A simple "love you, sweetheart." Nothing. Still, duty kept me pinned in place. By the time I finally got home, the sky was beginning to pale with early morning frost. And by then, Lily had already lived through the longest night of her life. I didn't know the details until later. But after everything settled, she told me exactly what happened. And I've replayed her words 100 times since. After I left, Ethan played the attentive son for nearly an hour. He made tea for Mom, asked polite questions, even offered to adjust her blankets. Lily told me she didn't trust it for a second. Not because of what he said. Because of how he watched things. The office door. The hallway. The lockbox drawer near my desk. A man measuring opportunities. Around 10:30, Mom fell asleep. Lily sat beside her bed reviewing medication notes I'd written out. That was when she heard Ethan's voice drifting from the study downstairs. Low. Sharp. Controlled. He thought she was asleep on the living room couch. He was wrong. She moved quietly down the hall and stopped outside the office. The door was cracked open. Inside, Ethan stood at my desk with his phone pressed to his ear. The lockbox sat open. My father's trust paperwork spread across the desktop. Lily listened. Tomorrow morning, Ethan said. No warmth in his voice now. No polished sun routine. Just calculation. She's weak enough. We'll tell her Claire reviewed everything already. A pause. Then, no, she won't question it if she's medicated. Another pause. Then the words that turned Lily cold. If she refuses, we'll pressure her until she signs. Silence. Then Ethan laughed softly. That sound, Lily told me, scared her more than anything. Because it wasn't angry. It was casual. Like what he was planning meant nothing at all. She backed away carefully. But old hardwood floors have betrayed better people. A board creaked beneath her foot. Ethan stopped talking. Who's there? Lily ran. Not wildly. Instinctively. The kind of fast, quiet movement survival teaches. She reached Mom's room just as Ethan appeared in the doorway. His expression was still smiling. His eyes were not. What are you doing up? He asked pleasantly. Lily said nothing. Mom had awakened by then, immediately sensing tension. What's happening? Ethan stepped inside. Nothing, Mom, just checking on things. Then he looked directly at Lily. And in a calm voice he said, No one's going to believe anything you say. Lily later told me that sentence hit harder than any threat. Because she'd heard versions of it her whole life. From foster parents who drank too much. From caseworkers too tired to listen. From landlords. Teachers. Strangers. People who looked at a homeless girl and saw someone disposable. Mom, God bless her, understood immediately. Years of nursing teach you how to read fear. She reached for Lily's hand and squeezed it. Hard. Then she whispered, Get Claire. Ethan heard. And his smile vanished. Give me the phone, he said. Lily backed away. No. His voice sharpened. Now. What happened next still amazes me. This 19-year-old girl, cold, exhausted, hungry, alone, stood her ground against a grown man twice her size, because an old woman she barely knew had asked for help. Some people spend decades becoming brave. Others simply choose it when the moment comes. Ethan lunged. Lily moved fast. Later, she told me one of her foster placements had required self-defense classes after another resident got violent. That training saved all of us. She sidestepped him, drove her elbow into his ribs, and sent him crashing into the hallway table. The lamp shattered. Mom screamed. Ethan recovered quickly, furious now. He grabbed Lily's arm. She twisted free. He swung. She ducked. Then she snatched one of my father's old neckties from the hall rack and used Ethan's momentum against him, sending him sprawling face first onto the living room floor. Before he could rise, she yanked his arms behind the dining chair and tied him tight. Marine-grade restraint would have made me proud. Then she called 911 and waited, all while Ethan cursed and threatened and promised revenge. Still she stayed. Still she protected my mother. And when I finally pulled into my driveway an hour later and saw the front door hanging open, I had no idea the terrified young woman standing inside had just fought for my family harder than my own brother ever had. There are moments in life when your body knows something is wrong before your mind catches up. The second I pulled into my driveway that morning, every nerve in me lit up. The front door was open. Not cracked. Wide open. The porch light swung in the wind, tapping softly against the siding with that hollow, irregular knock that instantly makes a house feel wrong. I killed the engine but stayed still for half a breath. Marine training has a way of sharpening fear into procedure. Observe. Assess. Move. The house sat in unnatural silence. No television murmuring from Mom's room. No oxygen machine humming faintly through the walls. Nothing. That scared me most. I stepped out slowly and moved up the porch steps. The cold air bit through my uniform jacket. Somewhere down the street a dog barked once and fell quiet. My hand drifted instinctively to the empty holster space at my hip before I remembered I'd left my sidearm locked on base after overnight duty. Bad timing. I pushed the door wider. Glass crunched beneath my boots. The lamp from the hallway table lay shattered across the hardwood floor. One of the dining chairs was overturned. The framed photograph of my father in his navy dress whites had fallen from the wall, the glass cracked clean across his face. For one terrible instant I thought I was too late. Mom. No answer. I stepped deeper inside. Mom? Then I heard breathing. Fast. Shallow. Someone standing just beyond the living room archway. I turned sharply. And there she was. Lily. Her face was pale enough to disappear against the wall behind her. Her hoodie sleeve was torn near the wrist, and one trembling hand gripped the edge of the doorway like she needed it to stay upright. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then I saw what was at her feet. Ethan. He was tied to one of my dining chairs so tightly his wrists had gone red. Blood ran from a split at the corner of his mouth. His expensive coat was gone, his dress shirt wrinkled and stained. And he looked absolutely furious. Claire, he snapped, untie me right now. This little psycho attacked me. Then another voice cut cleanly through the room. Don't you dare. I froze. Mom stood in the kitchen doorway. Standing. Not slumped in her wheelchair. Not gasping in bed. Standing upright with one hand braced lightly against the frame, her breathing steady, her face pale but alert. For 3 months she'd barely been able to cross her bedroom without collapsing. And there she was, looking stronger than she had in weeks. I felt my knees weaken. Not from relief. From pure disbelief. Mom? She gave me the same calm look she used to wear when I'd come home bruised from childhood fights. The look that said, steady yourself. I'm all right. I stared at her. Then at Lily. Then at Ethan. My brain refused to connect the pieces. What happened? Ethan answered first. She's insane. I tried helping Mom and she attacked me out of nowhere. Claire, she's homeless. God knows what she's on. Shut up. The command left my mouth before I even thought it. Years of military authority made the words crack like gunfire. Ethan actually flinched. I turned to Lily. Her eyes filled instantly, not with panic but exhaustion. She looked like someone who'd spent her last ounce of strength simply staying upright. Tell me. Her voice came out rough and thin. He was trying to make your mother sign papers. She refused. He grabbed her arm. I stopped him. I looked at Mom. She nodded once. Every muscle in my body locked. I turned slowly toward Ethan. His polished confidence had begun to crack. Claire, she's lying. Mom's voice stopped him cold. No, she isn't. The room went silent. I had spent years waiting for Mom to say those words out loud. To stop protecting Ethan from the consequences of himself. And hearing her do it now felt like watching a wall finally collapse after decades of strain. She moved carefully toward the couch and sat down, still breathing evenly. Lily rushed to steady her. The tenderness in that simple movement told me more than any explanation could. Mom took Lily's hand. Then she looked at me. He forged trust documents. He told someone on the phone he'd force me to sign before you got home. Ethan laughed harshly. This is ridiculous. But he sounded afraid now. Good. Mom continued. When I refused, he grabbed me. Lily stopped him. I looked at Ethan's split lip and suddenly understood. Not assault. Self-defense. And Ethan knew I'd figured it out. You're really taking her word over mine, he snapped. That was when I saw it. The paperwork scattered across the floor near the office doorway. Dad's trust folder lay open. Several pages bore fresh signature lines. And clipped neatly to the top was one document with my mother's name already forged across the bottom. Poorly forged. Rushed. Sloppy enough that even a clerk would have caught it. I felt something inside me go very still. The kind of stillness that comes right before action. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Ethan's face drained. Claire, wait. Number. His voice sharpened. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. For once in his life, Ethan had overplayed his hand. While the dispatcher answered, Lily suddenly swayed beside Mom. I caught her before she hit the floor. She weighed almost nothing. Too light. Too tired. Up close, I could feel the trembling running through her whole body. The delayed shock had finally caught her. It's okay, I said quietly. Her eyes searched mine. For judgment. For blame. For disbelief. Instead, I said the only truth that mattered. You protected my mother. And for the first time since I'd met her, Lily cried. Not loudly. Just silent tears sliding down a face too young to carry so much pain. I helped her sit beside Mom on the couch. Mom wrapped an arm around her shoulders like she'd known her forever. And standing there in the wreckage of my living room waiting for sirens to approach, I realized something extraordinary. The stranger I'd picked up outside a gas station had defended my family more fiercely in one night than my own brother had in 40 years. And somehow, the worst was still ahead. The police arrived 7 minutes later. I remember checking the microwave clock when the first cruiser pulled up outside. 6:13 a.m. Funny what the mind clings to in moments like that. 2 officers came through the front door, followed by a third who lingered near the porch, all local Henrico County deputies. Middle-aged, calm, experienced enough not to rush to conclusions just because one side was louder than the other. That worked in our favor. Ethan had already started performing. The second officer, Grayson, stepped inside. Ethan straightened in the chair and let his voice rise just enough to sound wounded but controlled. Thank God, this girl attacked me. She broke into my mother's house and assaulted me while my sister was gone. He sounded polished. Reasonable. Credible. And if I'm being honest, for one brief second, I understood exactly how he'd fooled so many people for so many years. Men like Ethan survive by knowing what trust sounds like. Officer Grayson looked at him then, at Lily sitting pale and trembling beside my mother. Then he looked at me. You called this in? Yes. What happened? I gave the facts exactly as I'd learned them. No embellishment. Military reports teach discipline. Dates, times, actions. Nothing extra. When I finished, Grayson nodded and crouched beside my mother. Mrs. Donovan, can you confirm this? Mom looked smaller somehow in the morning light. Not weak. Just tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying disappointment too long. She folded her thin hands in her lap and looked directly at the officer. Yes. No hesitation. No softening. No excuse for Ethan. Just truth. I saw something shift in Officer Grayson's face. People know when they're hearing honesty. Ethan knew it too. And panic began creeping into his expression. This is insane, he snapped. She's confused. She's heavily medicated. Mom cut him off. Don't you dare use my illness to call me incompetent. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I hadn't heard that tone from her since I was 14, and she caught Ethan stealing cash from Dad's wallet. It still carried steel. Officer Grayson turned to his partner. Photograph the paperwork. The younger deputy moved immediately toward the office floor where the forged trust documents remained scattered. Ethan saw it happen. And I watched the exact second he understood the game was over. His face changed. The Polish vanished. In its place came something harder. Meaner. The real Ethan. He looked at Lily. This is your fault. The hatred in his voice made her flinch. I stepped between them before I even thought about it. Say one more word to her. He actually laughed. You picked her over your own family. That question would have hurt me once. Years ago, maybe even months ago. But standing there looking at this frightened young woman who had fought for my mother while Ethan tried to rob her, the answer came easy. No, I said quietly. I chose decency over blood. That landed. His face tightened like I'd struck him. Good. While deputies searched the office, Mom reached for Lily's hand. The gesture seemed to steady both of them. Then Mom said something none of us expected. "I know who you are." Lily blinked. "What?" Mom smiled faintly. "Not at first. You've changed, grown up." Lily looked utterly lost. Mom squeezed her fingers gently. 3 years ago, St. Matthew's Church Outreach Clinic, you brought in an elderly woman with pneumonia. You stayed with her for 6 hours because she was scared to die alone. I saw recognition dawn slowly across Lily's face. "That was your clinic." Mom nodded. "You wanted nursing school. You just completed your CNA certification but couldn't afford the state exam fees." Lily's lips parted. The color drained from her face. "Oh my God." Mom smiled softly. "I paid them." The room went still. Even Ethan looked confused. Lily stared at my mother as tears welled instantly in her eyes. "That was you." Mom nodded again. "You wrote me a thank you letter afterward. I kept it." She looked at me. "Top drawer of my dresser." I moved quickly and found it exactly where she said, a neatly folded letter yellowed slightly at the edges. I handed it to Lily. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside, in careful younger handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists. I promise I'll spend my life earning this chance." Lily covered her mouth. A sound escaped her, then not quite a sob, not quite disbelief. Something deeper. The sound a person makes when they discover they mattered to someone all along. I looked at my mother, stunned. "You never told me." Mom's smile turned sad. "She asked for privacy. She was embarrassed." Lily nodded through tears. "I was living in my car." Mom brushed a strand of hair from Lily's face with the tenderness of memory. "You were brave then, too." Officer Grayson returned from the office carrying a hard drive and several folders. His expression had sharpened considerably. We found multiple altered trust drafts and email correspondence with a Richmond attorney discussing coercive execution of estate revisions. He turned to Ethan. "Sir, you are under arrest for attempted fraud, forgery, and elder financial abuse." Ethan's face went white. For the first time in his life, charm failed him. "No, wait." The handcuffs clicked around his wrists. He looked at me then. Not angry. Desperate. Like he still believed some old family loyalty might save him. "Claire, please." And just like that, I saw him clearly. Not as the brother I'd spent years hoping would change. Not as some tragic disappointment. Just a man who had made his choices. Again and again. And finally run out of people willing to protect him from them. I said nothing. The deputies led him past the doorway and into the pale Virginia morning. When the cruiser drove away, the silence inside the house felt different. Not empty. Cleared. Like a storm had finally broken. Behind me, Lily still sat clutching that old letter. And my mother smiled at her the way mothers smile at daughters. That was the moment I realized. Ethan had spent his whole life trying to steal what wasn't his. And in one impossible night, Lily had become family without taking a thing. People imagine revenge as something loud. A slammed courtroom door. A dramatic confession. Someone finally getting exactly what they deserve while the injured party stands victorious and smiling. Real revenge, I've learned, is quieter than that. Real revenge is simply refusing to let someone's cruelty shape who you become. 3 weeks after Ethan's arrest, I sat in a Richmond courtroom and watched my younger brother discover what truth sounds like when no one interrupts it. The hearing was held on a gray Thursday morning, one of those damp Virginia days when the whole city seems wrapped in low clouds and old memories. I wore my marine dress blues. Not for theater. For my mother. She'd always loved seeing me in uniform. Said it reminded her that honor was still real in the world. Mom couldn't attend in person. Her condition had worsened after the stress of that night, and hospice recommended she remain home. Lily stayed with her while I drove downtown before sunrise, the city still half asleep beneath the glow of street lamps. As I walked into Henrico County Circuit Court, I felt strangely calm. No anger. No satisfaction. Just clarity. Ethan sat at the defense table in a navy suit I recognized from our father's funeral. That unsettled me more than seeing handcuffs ever could. He'd chosen that suit deliberately. A reminder of family. A silent plea dressed as strategy. When he saw me, his face softened into something practiced and wounded. "Claire," the expression said, Please remember who I am. The trouble was I finally did. The prosecutor laid out the evidence cleanly. Forged trust drafts, email exchanges with his attorney, financial records showing prior suspicious withdrawals from our mother's accounts, years of small thefts escalating into outright fraud. Then it was my turn to testify. I took the stand and told the truth. Nothing more. Nothing less. I described finding the house, the forged documents, Lily's account, my mother's statement. I did not embellish. I did not attack Ethan's character. I did not list the countless childhood betrayals still buried in memory. The facts were enough. When the prosecutor finished, Ethan's attorney rose for cross-examination. He was younger than Ethan, sharp-faced and visibly nervous. He tried suggesting emotional bias, family resentment, misinterpretation. I answered every question calmly. Years of military inquiry boards teach a person how to remain steady under pressure. Eventually, the attorney sat down. There was nowhere left to push. Then the judge reviewed my mother's recorded deposition. She'd insisted on giving it from home the day before. Hospice had wheeled her favorite armchair near the living room window, where winter sunlight touched her face. Even sick, she looked composed, dignified. The judge listened carefully as she described Ethan's years of manipulation. Then came her final statement. If my son had shown even half the devotion this young woman did in one night, none of us would be here. The courtroom went silent. I glanced at Ethan. He was staring at the table, and for the first time in his life he looked ashamed. Not caught. Ashamed. There's a difference. The judge issued formal charges and denied bail pending further proceedings. Ethan would likely serve years. As deputies led him away, he stopped beside me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "You always were Dad's favorite." It was such a childish thing to say, so deeply rooted in the old stories he'd built to justify himself. And suddenly I understood. Ethan had spent his whole life competing in a race no one else was running. I looked at him carefully. "No, Ethan," I said. "He just expected more from you because he believed you could be better." Something in his face broke then. Not dramatically. Just a small collapse around the eyes. The kind of fracture that comes when a lie finally loses its strength. Then he was gone. When I got home that afternoon, the house smelled like chicken soup. Lily stood at the stove, stirring a pot, while Mom supervised from her wheelchair, like a retired general pretending not to command the troops. For one wonderful second, it looked almost ordinary. A daughter coming home. Dinner on the stove. Someone humming softly in the kitchen. The kind of home life I'd once assumed had vanished forever. Mom looked up and smiled. "Well, it's done." She nodded. No celebration. No triumph. Just peace. That evening after dinner, Mom asked Lily to bring the estate paperwork from the study. I assumed she wanted to review old records. Instead, she signed a new trust amendment while our attorney watched by video call. Half would remain mine. The other half would create a scholarship fund for foster youth entering nursing programs. The Lily Mercer Healthcare Scholarship. Lily nearly dropped the folder. "No, Mrs. Donovan, I can't." "Yes, you can," Mom said firmly. "You already earned it." Tears filled Lily's eyes. She looked at me as if asking permission to accept grace. I smiled. "Looks like an order." That made her laugh through her tears. Then Mom turned to me. "And Claire?" "Yes. Offer her the job properly." I understood at once. I looked at Lily. "My mother needs long-term care. Nursing school starts next fall. Room and board are included. Tuition too if you'll let me help." Lily stared at me. For a heartbeat, I thought she might refuse. People who've been abandoned enough often mistrust kindness most of all. Then her face crumpled completely. She covered her mouth and sobbed. Not from sadness. From relief. The kind so profound it almost hurts. Mom reached for her hand. And sitting there beside them, I realized revenge had already happened. Not in court. Not in Ethan's arrest. But here. In this kitchen. Where love had quietly built something he could never steal. My mother died 6 weeks later on a Sunday morning in early spring. The dogwoods had just begun blooming across Richmond, pale pink and white against the warming sky. She always loved dogwoods, said they looked like little folded prayers opening all at once. It was just after 7 when she opened her eyes and smiled at us. Lily sat on one side of her bed. I sat on the other. For the past month, we had fallen into the kind of rhythm families build over years: shared meals, quiet jokes, small routines that stitched people together stronger than blood ever could. Lily had moved into the guest room down the hall. The first week, she apologized every morning for taking up space. By the second week, she was arguing with me about how much coffee I drank and reminding me to take my boots off before tracking mud across the kitchen floor. By the third week, she was family. Mom knew it too. That morning, her breathing was shallow but peaceful. No struggle. No fear. Hospice had prepared us well enough to recognize the signs. Still, nothing prepares you for the final moment when someone you love is both fully here and already beginning to leave. She looked at Lily first. That made perfect sense to me. Did you finish your application essay? Lily laughed softly through her tears. Yes. Good. Mom nodded once satisfied. Then she turned to me. Her eyes were clear, brighter than they'd been in weeks. Claire. Yeah, Mom. You can rest now. Just 5 simple words. And somehow they reached into places inside me I hadn't realized were still braced for battle. I'd spent so many years carrying everything. Duty. Grief. Responsibility. The constant low ache of trying to hold broken things together through sheer force of will. And with that one sentence, she gave me permission to set it down. I took her hand and kissed it. I love you. She smiled faintly. Then she looked at both of us and whispered the last words she ever spoke. Family isn't blood. It's who stays. And then, as gently as a tide slipping back to sea, she was gone. No drama. No fear. Just peace. The funeral was held 3 days later at St. Matthew's. The same church where Mom had volunteered for 20 years, and where years earlier she had quietly paid for a homeless girl's nursing certification because she saw something worth saving. The sanctuary was full. Former nurses from St. Mary's. Neighbors. Church friends. A few Marines from my unit. And Lily seated beside me in a simple navy dress Mom had bought her the month before for important occasions. She looked beautiful. Not because of the dress. Because for the first time since I'd known her, she looked entirely at ease in her own skin. After the service, Father Brennan handed me a sealed envelope. This came for you yesterday, he said quietly. The return address was Henrico County Jail. Ethan. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. The letter inside was short. Claire, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know something. When Mom testified, I finally heard myself the way everyone else must have for years. I hated what I saw. I was wrong about almost everything. Especially you. Tell Lily she was braver than I ever was. I'm sorry. Ethan. I read it twice. Then folded it carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Lily watched my face. What is it? An apology. Her eyebrows rose. Do you believe it? I thought about that. Then I looked toward the spring sunlight pouring through the church doors. Yes, I said. I think he finally told the truth. That didn't erase anything. It didn't undo harm. Some wounds heal into scars, not skin. But in that moment I realized forgiveness isn't about restoring what was broken. It's about refusing to carry bitterness any farther than necessary. So I let it go. Not for Ethan. For me. Months passed. Summer came. Then August. The morning Lily started nursing school, we left before sunrise. She wore fresh scrubs and clutched her acceptance packet so tightly I worried she'd wrinkle it beyond repair. Halfway to campus, I pulled off Route 301 and stopped at Miller's Gas and Grocery. The same old roadside station. The same cracked pavement. The same faded signs in the window. Lily stared at it and smiled. You planned this. Maybe. We sat there for a moment, remembering. Then she laughed softly and shook her head. You know, that was the first time anyone ever told me to get in the car and meant safety. The words hit me harder than she knew. I smiled. Best order I ever gave. She reached across the console and squeezed my hand. Then we drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence. When I dropped her at the nursing building, she turned before getting out. Dinner at 6. Wouldn't miss it. She grinned and disappeared into the crowd of students beginning their futures. And as I watched her go, I understood something my mother had known all along. Sometimes the people we rescue end up rescuing us right back.